Okay, for the listening public, our work session went a little late, so we're getting started just right after 7 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call the Seward City regular council meeting to order for the first time, January 10th, 2022, this year. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Could you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Tonight's roll call: Wells.
Here.
Osenga.
Here.
DeMoss.
Here.
McClure.
Here.
Casagranda.
Here.
Calhoun.
Here.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is citizen comments on any subject except those items scheduled for public hearing. And tonight we have one public hearing item. So those who have signed in will be given the first opportunity to speak. Time is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, 36 minutes total time for the agenda item. We're looking for the speaker's name and if they're inside city limits, which anyone can speak, but for our records we put inside or outside city limits. So Madam Clerk, I'll turn it over to you.
Madam Mayor, the first person signed in is Bob Valdez.
Thank you.
Bob Valdez, 525th Avenue, Seward. Evening staff, council, public. Last night, that's not your fault, last night I ran out of fuel yesterday morning. It wasn't my fault. So I got 200 gallons, $647, $25 tax, $95 night charge, $50 to call the guy up that has started fire. I was on ad hoc, that's way back, and it was called ad hoc and it was Ports and Harbors and back 25 years ago. And that's the last time that I've heard mention this town that we need natural gas. We got thousands of board feet now right there in Cook Inlet. And I think, what's it called, PACAF or whatever, PACAF, should sit down and let's write a letter to the governor, McKiskey, whatever that guy's name is, and the mayor. And I got a letter and I should have brought it, but when I had talked to the borough about us, let's get natural gas. Now there's no reason for this. We got no choice. We're hamstrung. And I know what the old timers are going to say. Big Daddy is going to sue us. And you know who Big Daddy is. The only fuel company in town. So, can we get one day work session or something like that? I'll take a day off from work. Let's get this natural gas kicked off. And it's so simple. They're trucking natural gas from McKiskey to Fairbanks. And now I think they're switched over to either Prudhoe Bay to Fairbanks or up there at Palmer to Fairbanks. And you mean we can't truck it over 120 miles? Now back in our day, Senator Torgerson had it all lined up for a pipe coming in. We call it where Gwen's is. There's a stub in the road there, Yellow Gates. From there, had it all set up. And I don't know who was the Forest Service. We're coming through Resurrection Bay and over. Some dude, the Forest Service, yeah. He wanted a major highway in there. He didn't want a gas line road, so that stopped the whole thing. So I think it's time now that we sit down here and give us a choice. We get some natural gas there. We're going to truck it in. We could truck it in, or we could barge it in. You could have a ballast tank out there, a barge where you hook up, and it fuels the whole line or something. So I think PACAB's got a book full, but I think they ought to set this on the agenda and let's get started and get back this natural gas business. And we could bring it in by railroad, no offense, but we could bring it in by railroad. So I appreciate it if we get working on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else signed in to speak?
Yes, ma'am. The next is Tom Tucus.
Tom Tucus, 208 Bear Drive. I was shocked this weekend when I read the news article about the state firing George Peck. And I'd really like to see a proclamation of appreciation for George. George has contributed to this community for over 40 years of service, to the community of service. I've often thought about what a lonely, difficult job it would be to be a magistrate in a small town. And the fact that George has pulled it off for 40 years is amazing. I know that George has, I felt like he was insulted because in the article it said, well, magistrates deal with things like parking tickets. And I was thinking, George deals with a lot of domestic issues. He's dealt with a lot of issues here over the years. And I've always thought that he was insightful and fair, a little quirky, but but wonderful. So I think we will truly miss not having George here, and I'm truly disappointed the state took the steps they did to fire George. And I'd like to see the local community that recognized George for his service over the years. That's it.
Madam Mayor, next signed in is Carol Griswold.
Thank you. Dear Council, is this thing on? Dear Council, Administration, and Public, I have many concerns about this 332-page council packet. The sheer size exceeds the ability of the public to adequately research and provide thoughtful comments on every issue. Public input should be valued and considered. I question whether council members had time to even read my and others' comments. 3 lengthy items should not have been included on the agenda. The proposed appropriation of over $100,000 for a study to develop an undevelopable wetlands on the slopes of Mount Alice is an absurd waste of taxpayer money. This decades-old pipe dream does not need an expensive study to understand its unfeasibility. The purchase of the Gillespie property is premature without a soils analysis, recent flood data, the updated tsunami inundation maps, and the contamination results of the existing public works site. It is also premature to sell off the Doorway City Playground before the replacement playground is ready. The future Jesse Lee home site is just piles of gravel. The lot is overpriced with potentially illegal restrictions. It streamlines the process to put all 3 ordinances up for introduction on the consent agenda. However, these critical amendments to Title 15 are not ready for adoption. Did Council actually read and understand them? Does Council have amendments ready to correct deficiencies? I am appalled that the city is willing to destroy Forest Acres Park and Campground for a subdivision. What park is next? Seward has plenty of vacant housing in the winter, most owned by out-of-towners. Our extreme focus on tourism has led to an imbalance in our economy and a huge need for seasonal housing for temporary workers. The explosion of nightly lodging, especially whole house nightly lodging, has booted residents out of their rentals. Stop destroying the charm of Seward and quality of life for residents, and focus on how to recreate a real town instead of a tourist town. The CCD advises that the Kenai Peninsula Borough community transmission level continues to be high. The Omicron variant is much more contagious. Yet Zoom has been removed as an option for verbal participation in city government. The public has to comment in person wearing a mask, because I choose to, but it's hard, in a poorly ventilated room without air infiltration. Please reinstate the Zoom option. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Is there anyone else signed in?
Next signed in is David Squires.
You?
Madam Mayor, council members, administration, thank you for having me come up here. It's been a long time. Wanted to speak on about 3 different resolutions you have on tonight. Resolution 22-004, and actually I'm going to support this one because I think it's about time. Those trucks I bought, and I'm ancient, they are too. So Clinton needs new vehicles for that stuff. The next one is 22-006. Directing the manager to create a project plan for the expensive utility infrastructure. I applaud that it's a great idea. It's way past the time that we should have had that done. So we have a plan to go to, instead of just, well, when something comes about, to redo it. Because then everybody gets up in arms about stuff. The last one is resolution 22-005 for Gillespie property. The lot that's addressed as 2405, I talked to the city manager today about it. She's very receptive, but I want to remind council about what that area was back in the late 80s, early 90s. It was a stump dump site, and all that debris was buried. And so it's not suitable for putting buildings on, because eventually you'll have sinkholes, and there goes your investment. So I'm not opposed to having the public works site out there, but I think it's better on the property that we already own. The other parts are the extension of the water line, which isn't too bad because we have a house that's up near that way that the water line was extended, so it goes into the property we have currently. But the sewer system is something that will have to be added. That's going to be expensive, in the electric line too. Even though transmission lines go over that area, you're limited where you can put a building because you can't build underneath the transmission lines, and you have to be 15 feet on either side of them. I know because I tried to do that with another building and Jeff Estes caught me. So, I just aged myself all the way through. I want you to, I know that this resolution only asks the city manager to start negotiations, but I think it's important for council to be aware of some problems that are on the property if you're thinking about buying it before you get too deep in the water. And a little bit of heads up. I hope that city manager goes through and requesting core sites in different areas on that one lot, which she said she would. And I think she has good head on her shoulders about the property stuff. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next signed in, Madam Clerk?
And last signed in, I have Bruce Jaffe.
Yes, sir. Bruce Jaffe, outside the city limits, Moose Pass. And my drive into town again tonight lets me know what a beautiful peninsula area we live in and the opportunity to live here. And come before the council, administration, mayor, and be part of this same group of people that cares enough about the community to come out. That's the group I want to be part of. First, the recent action by the administration to extend the grant for the heat loop project is appreciated, but must be extended to a realistic time frame and the project pursued with full dispatch. Now, I'm just going to read the underline because I know we have a time thing here, so the rest of it sort of fill in. I think that's what we learned in school, how to write that. In an effort to recruit speakers to come to the PACAB, I made calls to a variety of local leaders and individuals, mostly in charge of their respective organizations. I described a short presentation by them to PACAB, one or two at a time, over the course of 2 months. The response was positive and enthusiastic. The significance and real current need to fill available jobs in sewers. There are full-time funded positions in professional, craft, and unskilled fields in sewers that are not being filled due to lack of available amenities necessary to attract workers. And we can talk about that, and that's really the issue. It's not just one single issue. From my calls, what I heard repeated was housing, housing, housing. But that is not the only problem. In addition to housing, shopping, culture, recreation, scenic beauty, healthcare, education, transportation, and more form the draws for worker to sewer. And we're lucky to have such a beautiful scenery, but that's not enough. If you have a family, you want a place to go besides just the bars. The success of sewer to attract the diversity of employees in the industry is admirable, and we now see the proof of this in strong sales tax returns from sales in 2020 and 2021. For those, we did not have the cruise ships, but we still had sales in town. So that means we've diversified, we've done a pretty good job. We have industries that are sustaining jobs. In 2013, I believe it was the Chamber commissioned through a Seward Economic Growth Plan. It was by the Seward.com, and many of the problems that were anticipated, but too little had been done with the conclusions. I think this council has an opportunity to do something that for a number of years now we've had revolving chairs. We've changed council, we've changed managers several times. A lot of the city offices, administration have changed. Now, if you can be stable and move forward, you get an opportunity. I mean, The bottom was knocked out from under us in COVID, so there's no way but up. As far as the where to go, we were asked by the administration at PACAP to look at this. My idea was to bring in speakers individually, one at a time or two at a time. The concept of
So, Mr. Jaffe.
of a town meeting.
I appreciate you.
The question is, what is council's will?
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Is there any, was that the last signed in, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
Skip Ryerson, Inside City Limits. I read today's packet with much interest, specifically in regards to the proposed housing code definitions proposed by P&Z, as well as the proposed new residential property across the bay. And after considering all the struggles with the explosion of vacation rentals in our town over the past 5 years, it has occurred to me that we do not have an affordable housing problem, but rather we have an R1 housing code enforcement problem. Let me repeat that. I believe we have an R1 housing code enforcement problem. I want to thank P&Z and Community Development for their hard work in bringing about these new definitions, but I frankly became overwhelmed by all the changes that, in my opinion, created more complexity and ambiguity for future interpretation. I also continue to applaud this council for taking the bold steps to embrace change, and thus I would like to offer two following housing code changes that I might believe might eliminate these new definitions. Number one, under no circumstances may an R1 zone residence be allowed to be rented on a nightly basis or any period less than 30 days in its whole entirety. Number two, should an R1 residential owner, an individual registered owner of that property, choose to go into the B&B business, they shall comply with all city applicable codes for this business, and they must personally be the owner of record for said property and must reside in said property during the nightly rental engagements. This residential occupancy shall not be allowed by an agent, a corporation, a relative, etc., etc. But again, the owner of record must be on that property. I believe that if we enforce our existing city codes, this will afford our free enterprise system to work and be effective. And it will incentivize entrepreneurs in our community to invest in the building of necessary hotels, motels, and housing units to accommodate the seasonal demand in our community. And then maybe R1 houses will become more affordable for school teachers, JAG employees, prison and city employees, and their families who would like to move to our fine town. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Hearing and seeing none, next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda and consent agenda, and I'm looking for a motion and a second.
I move for the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda.
I'll second. And I have one change. I'm going to take ordinance 2022-002 off the consent agenda. That's just an ordinance for introduction. Any other changes? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to put resolution 2022-004 on the consent agenda.
Councilmember Casagrande?
So just to clarify, you said resolution 2022-004 you want to put on the consent agenda?
Yes.
For the, okay. I'm going to go ahead and object to that just because I had some questions that came up.
Any other changes?
Yeah, I'd like to pull ordinance 2022-001 from the consent agenda. And
while you're looking, are there any other changes? Okay, I'll go back to you.
that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Can you remove the financials, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. I know there was a note somewhere. If I could remove the October 2021 City and Providence financials, those were not included in our packet. Any other changes? Madam Clerk, we're ready to call for a vote.
Voting on tonight's agenda and consent agenda as amended. Calhoun,
Yes.
Casagrande,
Yes.
DeMoss,
Yes.
Osenga,
Yes.
Wells,
Yes.
McClure,
Yes.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
Your agenda and consent agenda are approved and approved on tonight's consent agenda. The introduction of ordinance 2022-003, amending portions of Seward City Code 15.10.226, land uses allowed, J, employee campgrounds. This ordinance will come for public hearing and enactment on January 24th, 2022. You have approved Resolution 2022-002, adopting an alternative allocation method for the fiscal year 2022 Shared Fisheries Business Tax Program and certifying that this allocation method fairly represents the distribution of significant effects of fisheries business activity in the Cook Inlet Fisheries Management Area and authorizing the city manager to apply for funds from the Shared Fisheries Business Tax Program. Resolution 2022-003. Bear with me. 007, amending the City Council Rules of Procedure, Rule 16, to reflect changes made to the evaluation forms and introducing new goal-setting forms for the city attorney, city clerk, and city manager. You have approved the December 13th, 2021 City Council regular meeting minutes, and you have approved the new liquor license and restaurant designation permit for the Gateway Hotel, license number 5983, Beverage Dispensary Tourism.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is proclamations and award, and the first proclamation is for the Polar Bear Jump Off Festival. We have someone here to, oh great, thank you. Thank you. And you know what? One of those girls out there have your proclamation, but I will go ahead. So whereas the Polar Bear Jump Off started in Seward in 1986 and is historically a weekend-long festival that includes a live auction, turkey bowling, a parade, and participants jumping into the near-freezing waters of Resurrection Bay and held on the third Saturday of January each year. Whereas the mission for this annual event is to raise pledges to help provide cancer patients and their families with information and support, fund research that leads to improved treatments, provide education about cancer prevention and early detection, and help ensure that everyone has access to life-saving cancer screenings and support for eliminating cancer in our society. And whereas the funds raised by this event assist the American Cancer Society West Region as well as Kids with Cancers on the Kenai Grant Program, and whereas it is through this hard work and dedication of all the volunteers and jumpers that help ensure that more survive cancer so that they can celebrate another birthday. Now therefore I, Christy Terry, Mayor of the City of Seward, Alaska, do hereby proclaim Saturday, January 15th, 2022 as the 37th Annual Polar Bear Jump Off at the Seward Boat Harbor, and I do commend all of its volunteers, supporters, and jumpers who participate in the festival. Tell everyone who you are and talk about the Polar Bear Jump for this year.
Sure, yes. My name is Lizzy Lyman. I'm the secretary on the board of the Seward Polar Bear Jump Off Festival. And so far this year, we are at $100,000 raised as of today. And so we're really excited to be able to do this for another year. And we've got the auction, we've got 2 new events, we found a movie from the 90s that we're really excited to show off at Tucus Bar, so that'll be a really fun new thing. And then we have a luminary moment on Sunday for sunrise. So we're excited about that new event as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have this event in Seward.
Thank you.
And then girls, why don't you, and I gave someone her, oh, your hat. Okay girls, come on in. Come stand right here and face the camera. Okay, so I'm going to make you all say your names before I read the proclamation. So who are you?
Pamela, Laura, Leah, Esme, Kate, and Coach Monserrati.
And so, whereas Seward Middle School girls basketball team did not have a 2020 basketball season due to COVID and school closure, which encouraged 25 young ladies to come out in 2021 for basketball to learn new skills and stay active. of which 21 had never played basketball before. Whereas the 10 girls on the A team chose to have fun and work together as a team all year, which resulted in a regular season record of 3-1 and ultimately winning the 2021 Borough Middle School Tournament Champions at home here on December 11th, 2021. Whereas this is the first girls basketball championship at Seward Middle School in the last 10 years. And whereas the Seward Middle School and the City of Seward are very proud of the Seward Silver girls basketball team for their great accomplishments. And this would have not have been possible without the support of their families, encouraging them to try new things, the school making sure they were student athletes first, and residents of Seward showing up and cheering at home during the borough tournament. Now therefore I, Christy Terry, Mayor of the City of Seward, do hereby congratulate the Seward Silvers girls basketball team and Coach Grace Williams and Coach Lexi, and commend them for their hard work and perseverance on this 10th day of January 2022.
Yep, so when we first got the group of girls, the first practice, a lot of them couldn't dribble with two hands, let alone one. But by the end of the season, everyone was dribbling with both hands and looking out with confidence, and it showed in the championship game.
So great job, girls. Very well done. Thank you, guys. Next on the agenda is the city manager's report. City manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to follow up on the heat pump. In the report that I reported that I requested an extension. It was approved. However, it was approved for 3 months. The agency told me that's all that they're doing are 3 month extensions at this time, with full recognition most likely any infrastructure funding will not be coming by that time frame, and I'll be putting in another request. But it has been approved. There's not a need for an additional resolution like last time, so it's been approved without it. One meeting that was held today, and we've talked about this issue in the past, so I thought I'd share with you the meeting, was regarding the jail. If you remember, there's a coalition of sorts being formed of municipal jails that are all in the same situation as us regarding underfunding of our jails. And we've all had the same issue of not being able to negotiate our contracts or speak directly with Department of Corrections. And so today a meeting was held with Tyson Gallagher from the governor's office. And the intent of the meeting was to bring him up to speed on the coalition's activities and the communication about each of the municipality are at a point of either closing jails or entering into a lawsuit to get the state to communicate. The intent of our meeting, and that Chris Noss, our lobbyist, set it up, was to let the governor's office know that. We did not want to move forward without any notice to the governor's office being caught off guard. So that meeting, I think the information was well received, and we'll see where we go from there. Really, our intent is to renegotiate our contract for full funding and continue operations, but that has not happened in many, many years. So, and creating a deficit for our communities, and we don't want the deficit any longer. So that happened today. So I'll let you know next steps and what happens next. So that's follow up on my report. In case there are any questions, other items on the agenda, I figure I'd address them as they come forward.
Yeah, thank you. So city manager's report starts on page 7. Are there any questions from council? Go ahead, Councilmember.
I have a question about the heat pump project. I believe that came through right when I got on council, and was it squashed because we had to match funds? Is that why?
Right. The amount of the project is larger than the amount that was appropriated by council for the project, and in fact, it's millions of dollars over the amount. So yes, that was that's why it hasn't moved forward, is because we do not have the match. We do not have the funds for the match. So my hope and desire, and what I've read about the infrastructure bill, is that there would be funding for that type of project. How it's going to materialize, I can't tell you that yet, but.
Okay, thank you. And then is that, do we know for sure that we can get that second extension?
Yeah,
Or third extension?
We're on a second one, and that has been extended, and they do recognize that there probably will be a third.
Okay.
They can't guarantee it, but.
Okay. One more question. I was hoping that you could just touch on the discussion with the railroad a tad, where we stand on that per what you put in the report, as far as the expansion on the passenger dock and the terminal.
Sure. So after our meeting with the railroad, there was further meetings that were held by a private citizen who isn't here, so I'll just, by a private citizen that had discussed a public partnership, and that person was told by the railroad that they were not interested in that, and I'm only conveying what I've been told. That person would have to convey the conversation, so I just want to clarify that, quantify what I'm saying here, and qualify. And so then this conversation was held, well, is the expectation that the city build the building, and we were told no, that is not the expectation, that the railroad intends on building and completing the project with railroad funds, which would be in the form of the bond for the railroad. That is what I've been told so far.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Are there any other comments or questions for administration? Next on the agenda is the city attorney's report, and that starts on page 24, and we're glad that you safely made it.
Yes, it was not nerve-wracking at all. A little bit slower, but that's all. Happy New Year. December was a little bit less busy than the typical month, which is not unusual. We did a little work on volunteer background check, legal question for the fire department, revised the policy for the police department about how to treat officers that are under investigation. Continued a little work on formalizing the drainage easement, working with the planning department on that. We started looking at the details of what would be involved in terms of code changes if the city council made the policy decision to sort of get the city out of the healthcare business, so to speak. I think that's coming up on a future work session for you, but you'll be making the big decision, and there's implementing it, which will have a few code type details. So we started looking at that. We've also started looking at selling a piece of residential property, which is it's on your agenda tonight, and what that might look like. I think tonight it's just a big picture question for you all as to, do you even want to sell that piece of property? I started looking into a pending legal case between United Cook Inlet Drift Association and the federal government. That's on tonight's agenda for executive session. And as Janet Bauer mentioned, we've taken a look at your existing community jail contract. Also familiarized ourselves in a general way with the status of the multiple redistricting lawsuits. Did a comment on an ATV ordinance, helped the chief a little bit on that, and some contract procurement questions. There's, I think there's a couple of port lease type things that are before you tonight that we did some work on, working with Mr. Regis on that. And also, since the last time I was here, we did get some feedback from the university, which had been kind of a long time coming on a proposed MOAs. We took a look at that. That's kind of moved on to a next phase, but I don't think it'll be before you for a little bit longer. I had a conversation, the Icicle plant, or Icicle/OBI plant, they had an environmental incident here. I don't think it was a major one, but ADC is requiring what's called a, well, it's a covenant, so it'll be on the land like as a permanent feature. And my understanding is it's going to require, as often is the case with this kind of diesel contamination, that you're putting some kind of concrete cap over the land, and then if you ever want to like build something else there that's going to require excavation, you're committed to clean it up. And so I had thought that that's going to require some kind of lease amendment with Icicle, because the lease doesn't really allow them to restrict the city property that way in a legal matter. And their attorney had a conversation with me. I think that's about a month out from getting into some kind of a form, but had at least a preliminary discussion with her about the need for a lease amendment. So that's kind of a summary of relatively modest amount of legal stuff, but now that I've sat here and read it, I guess it was a little bit, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Great, thank you, sir. Is there any questions for the city attorney?
If I can ask, with the University of Alaska, what lease amendment, what is it, UAF, the land?
The person that contacted me was the general counsel from Fairbanks. So yes, I mean, it's the big university, so to speak. I mean, their legal department, you know, the people, the players here, I don't think Fairbanks gets that involved in the day-to-day.
I do see the harbor master maybe can answer that question.
You've already helped answer that question, Madam Mayor. So the university and the shellfish hatchery are looking at redoing the lease and the land, separating the land between the two, because they got a major upgrade coming. So we need to get the MOA going between either the city and the shellfish hatchery. So the land, we know what's going on with the land, and there's a pump that they have to, saltwater intake they have to maintain, stuff like that. So that's what the MOA is all about.
Gotcha. Are there any other questions for the city attorney? Thank you. Very thorough report. Those have been very helpful.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is the Chamber of Commerce report by Executive Director Kat Sorensen. And I can't remember, is this your first or second time to
This is my
assist?
My first one in person. I may or may not have been in Florida last time.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, I'm super excited, especially because I get to hand out these. Randy, would you do the honors of starting that? The first is the 2022 Seward Visitor Guide. It's 8 of the 12 copies currently in Seward. The other 10,000 that are coming up currently are on a barge, and they will be arriving shortly. I did want to point out that we once again have a local photographer featured on the front. It's a Janessa Anderson photo, and we're super excited to have her photography as well as other local photographers fill the visitor guide this year. Some cool additions that we made this year as well is a trail and bear etiquette safety in the end. We were also able to add the harbor map to the visitor guide and include a lot of great images from around town. So take a look if anybody does want to see the new guide that aren't here, didn't get a copy. It's also online on our website, seward.com, and you can visit it there and see. Or we'll have some copies we'll have thousands of copies in the visitor center soon. The Seward Marine Guide I also just handed that out to you. We've been really excited to have this on hand. It's to help boost the maritime industry and get people knowledgeable of everything that Seward has to offer in the marine industry. And it's another addition to our great collection of print materials to help showcase everything that Seward has to offer. We have it slated on our schedule in March to start the final of this trio of guides and documents, which would be the hometown guide. So we're hoping to have that set and ready for the summer of 2022 when people start coming to town, so that we have a guide to hand anybody who moves here and says, here's what you need to know, what to do, where to do your laundry if you don't know. So we're looking forward to working on that. We've also been working with the city to provide branding and photography for legislative priorities. I saw a draft of the legislative priority document today, and I'm super excited to see the beautiful branding that we've created applicable to legislative priorities. It makes them much prettier, in my opinion. So happy to work with you guys on that and make a really great document in that and all-encompassing of the Seward brand. And then this is technically my December report, so I'm going to go back in time to November and talk about Shop Small Weekend, which was the weekend after Thanksgiving. We brought over 40 businesses and artists, makers, food and beverage and lodging providers together to encourage shopping local throughout Seward all weekend long. We were able to partner with these businesses and connect many pop-up vendors who might not have a store or a shop front year-round and put them in storefronts to give them that space across the weekend. And we did raffles, special events, and promotions, and we saw over 250 unique shoppers throughout the weekend, which was a really big boon for the community and something fun and exciting to do after that holiday. Looking back as well, sorry, this was also written before January, so I have to get my pre-New Year's Eve brain on. We marketed to people across the state and promoted events throughout town for New Year's Eve and the fireworks. It was really windy, but we were able to shoot them off at midnight with a big thank you to Fire Chief Kreitz and his team for being on hand, as well as the Harbor Master and his team for calming my anxiety with all the wind. I really appreciated that. And I wanted to give a big thank you to our sponsors, Forest Tides and Treasures, Seward Ocean Excursions, Seward Properties, Catalyst Engineering, Sunny Cove, and the Harbor 360 Hotel for making those possible again. The parking lots were packed on that windy night, so it was a really great opportunity to get out and enjoy the new year. We're also looking forward and helping out with the Seward Polar Bear Jump. Really excited to welcome that to town again. And then even beyond that, the Tsunami Bowl competition on February 5th, which will bring students from across the state in town to show how smart they are at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So we're helping out and showcasing all of the different things for people attending both of those events to do and being on hand. We're also working on creating a February weekend to attract visitors and excite locals across February 14th, also known as Valentine's Day. So if you or anybody you know has an organization or business that is hosting something or would like to across that weekend, reach out. We're trying to make it a really fun destination weekend for everyone in town. There's other not so exciting things on this update that I don't necessarily need to go through because I talk a lot, but Kellyanne Cavaretta hired and started in the Small Business Development Coordinator position today in the office. It was really great to have her on hand, and we've heard that they've already seen a handful of applicants from Seward to be consulted in that position. So we're really excited to have that as a resource in our community and have her knowledge and expertise help people create and walk through the small business process. And then I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for welcoming me to give another report. I look forward to honing these and getting them down and talking about what you guys like to hear. So thank you.
Are there any questions for the team, Director? Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Next on the agenda is the Seward Area Hospice presentation. Welcome. So have you come to the... Come up to the podium. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. It's good to see all of you, and I know you're really tired, so I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you tonight, Mayor Terry and council members and all the other city leaders that are here tonight. As I was walking in the building tonight, I became keenly aware that this is probably the first time in like 6 or 7 visits in front of this governing body that I'm here tonight not to ask for support for the animal shelter, but to thank all of you again immensely for all the work you put into that project, and I am beyond thrilled. Thank you so much. But tonight I get the opportunity to talk to you about my next great passion, which is the Seward Area Hospice, and talk with you a little bit about that and see if we can maybe negotiate some support for that program as well. And to keep me on task tonight, if you will allow it, I am going to be reading some of this information tonight. I am speaking on behalf of Ellen O'Brien. I'm taking her place, so if I screw up, Ellen, you better correct me right now. But I have provided each of you a little package of information, and I apologize again, it's not as complete as I would like for it to have been, but I put it together pretty quickly. Does everybody have your copies of that? Sorry. And I just want to go through some of the facts and the information in that little package, and then, of course, Ellen OBrien, the co-founder of the Seward Area Hospice, is here tonight. If anybody has any questions, she's right out here in the hall. So to go ahead and get started, I just want to make sure that everyone here tonight really understands that our hospice program here in Seward is a very small, very frugal nonprofit organization. We don't have a glamorous office. I think everything in our office, all the furniture, the lamps, the desks, were all donated. We don't have any formal stationery. We're lucky if our ink pens work. We are extremely frugal, but we manage really well with our limited resources. In the beginning, when we were really struggling, it's always just makes me laugh when I think about it. We were really desperate for officers to get our Seward Area Hospice started. And so I, the person who barely made it through high school algebra, was named the treasurer of the group. The only saving grace is that we were broke, we didn't have any money, so everybody was really impressed with my financial savvy. But just as soon as we were able to recruit a businesswoman here in town, a quite successful businesswoman who volunteered to join our group, I gave it to her. And to honor me then, I was named vice president. And we didn't even have the money, or we still don't have the money really, to splurge on name badges. So I was finally given a handwritten name badge, and I was the vice president of the group. So very proud of that. Anyway, our journey to get to where we are today has been really long, and at times it's been really difficult because there are still so few of us. There were a few of us in the beginning. Our organization remains very small, but we really wanted this dream of ours to work out for this community. So if you look in your packet that I gave you, the first thing on the top is a brochure that we do hand out from our office over on 3rd Avenue. But the first page is a letter that our program director, and I'm sorry she couldn't be here tonight, she really wanted to be. Her name is Tanya Foote. She is a registered nurse, has a lot of hospice experience. She wrote a few months back this letter to Mr. Osinga, and I think maybe, I'm sorry, sir, how do you pronounce your last name?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think she addresses you in there as well. Anyway, it was basically introducing our group. It was also explaining what we are, why we do what we do, how we exist, and how very badly we need community support to keep this Seward Area Hospice program going. On the next page, you'll see put together is a time frame, its timeline. And this 2008 timeline is actually my reflection of how we got started. And I want to tell you why this program means so much to me personally, and why this program must not only survive, but it really needs to thrive. Ellen and I think actually Ellen had probably started the wheels in motion way before I came to Seward in 2008. She was already thinking that we needed a Seward Area Hospice. And it was in that year, 2008, that Ellen and I were co-treating a much younger community member who was facing the end of her life. Ellen and I had gotten so attached to this patient and her family, and when it came time for her to die, she said to both of us that she really wanted to die at home. She did not want to die in the hospital. She did not want to go to Seward Mountain Haven. She wanted to go home. She wanted to die in her own bed. She wanted to be with her husband. She wanted to be with her son. And of course, we didn't have any way to make that happen. Her husband could not take care of her in the home. Her son was developmentally disabled, so he could not support us in any way to allow her to die at home. So she did die at home, but it wasn't the kind of death that any of us would have wanted for her. So that's when Ellen and I, and there was another nurse at the hospital, that's when we really started, we sprang into action. We knew we had to start a hospice program here in Seward. No matter what it was going to take for us to do it, we had to do it. We weren't going to go through this again. Little did we know, though, just how involved it would be to do this, how much time and energy it was going to take to make it work. And we knew we had to start with a volunteer program, because to get the certifications that we would need to be able to be a Medicare, Medicaid, hospice, to be able to bill insurance companies, we knew that that was going to take us forever. and it was going to cost a lot of money. So we started with our volunteer program. So we pulled together an advisory board, we elected officers, and eventually, as you can see the other timelines that are on there, then we made it. We actually made it. We really did. We're so proud of ourselves. So you see, yeah, is that the timelines? Yeah. It talks about we took our first client in 2017, that information. Okay, so now our journey's continuing and we need to keep finding the financial support we need to do what we need to do so that we can do what we do best. Helping our clients and their families spend the last days of their lives in a loving home environment, surrounded by the people they most care about, and then taking good care of the families as they start their grieving process, and then we support them all the way through as they move on with their own lives. The work is really hard on each one of us. It's usually very emotional, painful, most of the time, yes. It requires very long hours to support these clients, and there are times when we just cannot seem to do enough to ease their pain. But it's work that we feel the most passionate about at a time in our own lives when we want to be of service to the community and be of service to someone else. We see the huge difference we make in the lives of these people when they are in their saddest and their most vulnerable moments, and we do make it easier for them. We have many clients who have passed away, and to honor those clients, the families will send us a letter or they'll give us a phone call. And sometimes we will get a monetary donation, and even if it's $1 or if it's $10, we take that money, we turn right around though and put it right back into our programs. We place all of our donations and any other funds we receive right back into the program, and then we try to keep ourselves financially solvent for a little longer period of time that way. We got a next page in your handouts, a list of some of the ways that we have received funding, and again, I apologize, it's not very complete. But as everyone knows, this pandemic that we're going through has really negatively impacted our ability to do any kind of fundraising in groups. Anything on a large scale. Ever since February of 2020, it's pretty much shut us down. And as always, because there are so few of us in the Seward area, hospice to do fundraising for us is a really heavy ordeal, and it does take us away from the time we need to spend with the clients and their families that are suffering. So fundraising is really hard for our little group. The next page is a list of just some of the financial responsibilities we have. Any of those of you in this room that have ever owned your own business, you know how much it costs to run even a very small business and to make that work. So my ask of you this evening is just please consider financially supporting us and join our Seward Area Hospice as we continue to work so hard to keep this program going. So if we just take a second, there were just a couple things in the handout I wanted to draw your attention to. Let's see here. We're talking about the timelines. We saw our very first client in 2017, and that was after we got our Alaska state license, and we were licensed as a nonprofit and a volunteer-only hospice. In 2017, we were really fortunate to get an MOU with Providence, and we started right away providing hospice services to Seward, Mountain Haven, and the hospital. And then if you look at the bottom, from 2017 to 2022, we've actually provided direct care to 50 clients in the community. We've provided grief support to another 15 community-based clients, and those are people whose family who passed away in the lower 48, and they needed grief support. So we reached out to those people and helped them out. And we've recently, well, a total is, we received 10 additional inquiries for services that we may be able to provide at some point. Also, if you look at the financial responsibilities, I just do want to draw your attention to the fact that we only have 2 paid staff members. We have a program coordinator, it's Tanya Foote, and we have a volunteer program director. Her name is Lauren Coleman. Those are the only 2 paid staff members we have. So the rest of us are doing this out of love and compassion. So does anyone have any questions? How many of you are going to join us now?
Well, we're not gonna, so we can have you ask questions of the public.
Okay.
We'll check in with the council. Are there any questions for
Ellen?
For Ellen, or maybe she can peek in here and wave.
Oh, my mouth is so dry.
Thank you both very much for coming, and I know we're setting later a work session with Providence for February. So maybe, since you have that MOU, maybe more of this will.
I hope so. And thanks again for letting me come and talk to you guys tonight. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's good for the public to be aware that about the service and you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So next on the agenda is the forensic audit presentation, and I think we still have Green Forensic Accounting on the phone. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Well, great. So we appreciate your time during the work session. I know that was a lot of information that got quite detailed. And I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to you for the presentation during our regular meeting now.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jim Edmonstone, and I'm on the phone with Greg Green, who's the lead partner of the firm, Green Forensic, and Jim Scordo. And I'll start, and Jim will come in and talk in 2 minutes. Our audit was, for our audit, we did a two-phase approach. We did a high-level review of the city's electric, water, and sewer tariffs, and a corresponding assessment of the city's application of those tariffs, if they were done equitably. And we did a detailed analysis of the city's customer billings for the months of November, December 2018, and February, March 2019. What we were attempting to do in the audit are the following. We wanted to identify and quantify irregular procedures, policies, and practices observed impacting the accuracy of the electric, water, and sewer invoices for the city. And we were assigned a 4-month sample of November and December 2018 and February and March 2019. Some of the questions we were answering is, are the invoices consistent with applicable tariffs? Are they consistent with meter readings? Have the classifications of ratepayers for billing purposes been correctly and consistently applied? Has the policy for placement of demand meters been correctly and consistently applied? And has the calculation of EIUs been consistently and correctly performed? For the summary results, and what I'll do on the high level side is I'll just mention the results and I'll give a little bit of background. Number one, the city employs a classification system for city utility customers. The classification is basically, there's 4 classifications. There's residential, small general service, large general service. And what we found is it's inconsistent from 2 standpoints. One, the electric department measures the classification or assigns classification based upon the customer's consumption. In other words, the more electricity they use, the higher the classification, with the exception of residential, which I'll talk about in a minute. For the water side, it's based upon the nature of who the customer is. Are they a resident? Are they a barber shop? Are they a fish hatchery? And then there are schedules in the tariff that delineate each type of business and what their group is, the 4 groups I just talked about. In our report, if you look in the last schedule, we have put together a corresponding schedule. Rather than going by the groups and what the customer does, we put a schedule together detailing who the customer is and what group they're assigned to for water and sewer. Then so one of the things I just mentioned is there's an inconsistent application, but when the customer receives their invoice, they don't realize that there's possibility that for water and sewer, they're being classified one way, we'll say because they're a barber shop or say a grocery store, but they may be classified differently for electric purposes because they're using a lot of electricity. And we found that, and one of the solutions that's been discussed with the electric department is the potential for the electric department to consider issuing separate bills for their electric, so it would be more consistent. So when a customer receives their water sewer bill, they know that they're class 2, and when their electric bill, it may be a different class because they consume a lot of electricity. One of the other things we did in Exhibit E, which is page 244 of our report, is we looked again at the different definitions. And we got into the definition of what is a residence. Now that's important more on the electric side, because on the electric side, the rate is determined by how much you use, and the residence, of course, has the best rate. And residences are not subject to demand meters. So on page 244 of our report, we put together Exhibit E. And what we did is we looked at the different publications from the city. We looked at Title V, the Revenue and Finance, and we looked at what they defined a residence. Then we looked at Title 15, the Planning and Land Use Regulations. We looked at Title 14, the use regulations for the utilities regulations for municipal code. And then we looked at the 2021 tariff, the 2018 water and sewer tariff, and the electric demand policy. And we found that there were discrepancies in how a residence was described. We also looked at what is an allowable business under the residential classification. So code sections 1510-140 and 1510-240 describe when you can be classified as a resident even though you're carrying on a business within your property. And there are several criteria that are detailed in those code sections. At the end, we drew some conclusions at the end of our section about different things, sort of including bed and breakfasts and Airbnbs. And we looked at the codes in total, how a residence is defined across the board, and how we thought those particular types of businesses would be classified by the city based upon the existing codes. One of our recommendations in this area is that we believe the city should go back and look at all of their different municipal codes and tariffs and come up to a standardized classification for each type of business. So if you're a fish hatchery, you know you're a fish hatchery for planning purposes, for electric purposes, and for water purposes. The next section of our report deals with the equivalent residential units being charged to customers. We went back and we surveyed a number of customers in December. There's 28 in our report in Schedule F. And what we found was that our calculation of the equivalent residential units being charged to those water and sewer customers who do not have water meters was inconsistent with what the city is showing for them. And it wasn't inconsistent in one direction, it was inconsistent in both directions. As we looked further and as we had discussions with the city finance department, we found that the city doesn't have an historical record that supports how ERUs are being assigned to a customer. And in some cases, we found that the ERUs were assigned many years ago and were never updated by the customer and were never updated by the city. We also compared ERUs for the schools and a few businesses to meters. So we looked at a few businesses that are metered, and we went back and we calculated the ERUs to see if they would be the same, and we found in the samples that we looked at that the businesses were better off being metered than they were paying through ERUs. And one of our recommendations is that businesses should consider changing to water meters. We also looked at power factor. Power factor is a rate that is in the tariff. It's been there for years. It's not being charged by the city. It isn't being charged by the city, we understand, from the electric department because the current meters aren't capable or aren't calibrated to properly calculate what the power factor is. If you look at page 273 of our report, our Exhibit A is a pretty good example of what power factor is if you're not familiar with it, and there's some diagrams in there and a good description from the U.S. Department of Energy to describe how it works. But in essence, what happens is when you have some large businesses that have motors, etc., they may not be using their power efficiently, resulting in the electric grid that the city supports having to be more robust than it might be if businesses were using their power effectively. There are corrections to improve the power factor for businesses that are low, and the city's cutoff for charging would be 90% if they were being charged. And based upon some historical documents we looked at, there would be several large businesses that would be subject to power factor penalties if they were being charged. We also noted that the electric utility that supplies the power to the city is also measuring the city's overall power factor, and they also charge a penalty if it's below 90%, but the city's in the very high 90s at the moment. They don't appear to be in any danger of incurring a power factor. As another note, the city has entered into historically some special contracts. It's another part of the tariff, but those contracts are being phased out in 2022. And there's a new classification called the industrial classification, replacing individual specialized contracts. There's another section of the tariff that talks about the cost of power adjustment. And what the cost of power adjustment is, it's the charges that the city incurs every month from the utility. What is supposed to happen is those charges are then allocated based upon customer usages back to each customer. The tariff allows the city to just bill the entire prior month in the following month, just allocate according to total usage. But they also have the option of allocating it, smoothing it more in a longer manner. And that can be important sometimes because the utility bills what they call true-ups. And the true-ups can be quite large when compared to the total utility bill. And depending upon what month it is during the year and the amount, it could impact some users more than others, especially, for example, if the true-up came in winter when there's a lot fewer businesses. What we noticed in our analysis of this is that the city does not have a general ledger account, as we were told, to basically track how they're recovering the money, because they should be recovering all of the cost of power they're paying the utility. And they're doing it through Excel spreadsheets, but we don't believe they have a tracking account in the general ledger to make sure that they're getting all the money, especially considering that they do recover it over time. The sewer fuel adjustment is another provision of tariff. The city operates several generating one generating facility with several units on the edge of town, and that's in the event there's a power outage and there's no power coming from the utility. It doesn't happen immediately. It takes a little while for them to crank up. They're quite large. But there's a cost of both maintaining those units, and then there's a cost for fuel when and if they have to be used, because they use diesel fuel, which has to, I believe, has to come in on barge. Those costs can be allocated to customers, but sometimes the city manager is taking the discretion of building some of those costs to the actual electric department budget, and we noticed that in our overview of that particular area.
So we have about
charges, which was a concern that was.
So we have about 5 more minutes for your presentation. I think that it's important that we get as much as we can. So just a time warning on that.
Sure. Okay. One thing on demand charges, because there were some concerns raised to us when we first started. The fact that you have a demand meter doesn't mean you're going to be charged demand. And also, Tucus, they also bill demand to the city, but that is allocated to the city across the board through the cost of power adjustment, and is not charged just to the sewer demand customers. Jim, why don't you go ahead and do your piece at the end?
Sure. So, looking at the different rates being charged, we took the bill statistics, a big data file, and that data file is used, the data in that file is used to create the invoices for each customer. So that's what we used to compare to the tariffs. We looked at 34 different codes for each month, so 34 codes each month. for our examination period and compared what's in the bill statistics to the tariff. We found a number of discrepancies. They're in detail in the report. Some of them are, for example, prior period rates being charged, incorrect billing codes, so like a large customer rate being charged under a small customer code. Even if it is a large customer, it should be charged in the proper code. Discrepancies in the special contract rates, but they're subject to adjustments and some other adjustments by Tucus, the supplier as well. And then there are rates that we found that were not presented, that aren't in the tariff. So there's rates that are being charged for certain services that aren't detailed and approved in the tariff. They're not out of line per se, but if they're being charged regularly, they should be included in the tariff. For metered customers for water, there is a base charge and a usage charge. We found a number of discrepancies. Again, everything is detailed in the report where a base charge was being charged, but the usage was not, and also the opposite where the usage was being charged, but the base charge was not. Similarly with sewer charges, similar situation, base charge and usage charge, and we found all different combinations of those being charged properly or improperly, where the base charge is being charged, usage is not, usage is being charged, base charge is not. And there's a lot of different combinations of that, as well as different charges where a customer is being charged under ERUs for certain periods, under a metered code. So a lot of discrepancies there. They're all outlined in detail for each month in the report. And then comparing the bill statistics file to the meter readings, we found that all of the accounts that had bill statistics were in the meter verification report. We did, however, find a fair amount of accounts that were in the meter verification report that were not billed. And the majority of those were vacant properties, which makes sense. But then there are a number of other accounts that were not billed, and I would say approximately around 30 each month that were not billed. And there's various reasons for that, including invalid meters, zero usage, which also makes sense, and then meter readings that weren't captured, whether there was a malfunction in the meter or in certain cases we were informed that there are meters at times that are not reachable during certain weather conditions that are billed at a later time. So those are some of the factors that lead to those approximately 30 accounts that are not billed during those months. So that's a high level on that end.
Great, thank you very much. I know we've had a work session. Council has just been digesting since Friday. Public had a chance to ask some questions. We're going to have some follow-up from city administration, but I'll also turn it to the dais to see if there's any additional questions to answer just based on that presentation. Go ahead.
This is for the auditors. I don't know if you can hear me okay, but I just wanted to get clarity in the water metering coding that you were looking at. You referred to a base charge, that some customers had a base charge and a meter charge, and some people were missing the base charge. Can you verify that the base charge is different than the minimum charge?
The base charge, the code for the base charge is WMIN, which in the other presentation I mentioned. The tariff says that what's being billed as WMIN is a base customer charge that should be charged to all customers, and that the usage is on top of that base charge. That's what the tariff says.
Thank you, sir.
I have one. Go ahead. Hi, this is Councilmember DeMoss. I have a quick question. Thank you so much for your report. I'm wondering if, I know that there were multiple findings, so I'm assuming there's multiple reasons why all of these errors took place. I'm wondering if you were made aware of the reasoning of why any of the errors in particular occurred, or if you have an opinion on it at all.
On the billing side, I think much like the former question, I think there may have been a perception that there was that was a minimum, and that if usage surpassed the minimum charge, that the base charge did not need to be charged. And I don't know if prior year tariffs were stated that way, and that's why it was named WMIN, because it was a minimum at one point. But the 2018, 2019, and current tariffs state that it's a base charge to be charged to everybody plus usage. So that's one example where I think there may have been a misunderstanding or a change in how the tariff language was stated. But in that case, it's pretty clear. Again, some of the findings where there's a large customer charge and a small customer code, or a large customer rate is charged in a small customer code, that could be just, an inadvertent, accident. There's obviously multiple reasons for some of these. Those are probably the biggest ones, would be the WMIN, and the same on the sewer end, for SC is the base charge.
This is Jim. I'll step in too. I think on some of the issues, there's a lack of understanding, particularly among the customers and potentially among some of the cities, of the process. I know that in speaking to some customers, they didn't understand the whole ERU concept, didn't understand how they were being billed for it. And as we discussed in the work section a little bit, when it came to the pandemic and things like that, they didn't realize they were being charged, in essence, for water they may not even be using. If they had been on meter, they wouldn't have been charged that. But in talking to customers and speaking with them, they didn't understand the ERU process and how it impacted their bill, the way they were structured. I also think over the years things have happened. And staying with the ERUs for a moment, an ERU might be assigned to a building, but there was never a mechanism in place to follow up on that and to make sure that it was still in place. The customers didn't go to the city, and I don't believe the city went to the customers, except on a rare occasion when something would happen and it would sort of, you might say, blow up, and then they'd go look at it. With the other things that I talked about with the definitions, my impression is that as you go through and you build, like you might come out with a new electric code or a new electric tariff, a new water tariff, nobody sat back and looked at it on a holistic basis to say, are we being consistent? We're using the same terminology, but it doesn't mean the same thing. I don't think anybody's ever sat back and looked at it the way we did. It doesn't sound like it. And that creates confusion at a high level, which would then trickle down to other parts of the process. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Did you have a follow-up?
I just have one more question. Thank you so much. When you found errors, did you try to find out why it happened, or did you just identify the error and then move on to the next?
From our standpoint, yes, we did try to find it. We did try to understand it. We carried on a lot of discussions. We also floated some of our findings by the applicable management within the city, either in the finance department or say the elections department, and asked for their feedback. And some of their feedback is actually incorporated into our report. And for example, the concept of having the electric department do their own billing, that was generated from the electric department manager. That was his idea. And then on the finance side, for example, when we were going through the EIUs and the testing, we were running our results back, and then we were given as I said in the work session, both Sam and Jeremy were really candid with us and very helpful. And some of that information is in the report, and that helped our understanding of why things happen. For example, we were looking at a very large building in the EIU count, and there's a discrepancy between what the city believes the EIU count should be and what the customer does. Thought it should be based upon his analysis of what he had in the building. And it was volunteered to us by the city that they thought the EIUs hadn't been updated since the building was built in the early 90s. So that might help explain why some of these things are taking place.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time earlier tonight, and thank you for your time right now. We appreciate it, and we will let you go.
Okay, thank you, and we'd be happy to answer any more questions you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone need
Okay, have a good evening.
Thank you. Does anyone need a break?
Fine.
You good to keep going?
Let's get to the
Okay.
public hearing.
Next on the agenda is Resolution 2021-001. Madam Clerk.
Resolution 2022-001 is authorizing the city manager to enter into a consent assignment to Vertical Air LLC to the lease agreement L06008 with Juris Mindenbergs for Lot 5B, Block 1, Seward Small Boat Harbor Subdivision, City of Seward, Kenai Peninsula Borough, Plat 2000-19, Seward Recording District, 3rd Judicial District, State of Alaska, to extend the term of the lease for 16 years and to add 2 5-year options to extend.
And I'm looking for a motion and a second.
I move for the approval of Resolution 2022-001.
Thank you. Administration?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I should have a laydown, correct?
Well, so what we're gonna do is
Okay.
we're gonna, you can do your presentation,
Okay.
then we're gonna open it up, have the public hearing, then we'll come back to council and we'll, if there's any adoptions or amendments that need to be made, we'll do
Thank you. Okay, so we were working with somebody who wanted to buy this piece of property from Yuri Mindenberg. So we've been working with them, with the attorneys and their attorneys, and it's been a long process. And we got it all down, got it figured out to come here, and they were asking for an extension due to, purchasing the building, and the banks like the longer term, so that's why that extension was requested. And the extensions are just a normal thing that the city does to help, move things forward. We've done this before to other places down there. Actually, we did one, I think, last year with the mermaid, we did mermaid, so similar.
So I'm gonna go ahead and I will open up the public hearing. Madam Clerk, is anyone signed in to speak?
No, we don't have anyone signed in.
Is there anyone wishing to speak to this public hearing item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And before we get much further, I'm gonna make a motion that we adopt the substitute lease extension amendment that was laid down. And I'll need a second.
I'll second.
And then, so I wonder if you might speak to this.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So it was brought to the city's attention that this land, there was a discrepancy back in 2009 with some language needed inserted because the businesses put up a fence and there was no access to the back of the building. So that was, I guess I could say the lease. So that was a Darling lease. And so there was a description there, so there's a memorandum that was in this that I did not see and was brought to my attention, thank you, Councilmember, that all future lease assignments or new leases for the sites adjacent to Block 5A, Block 1, must have additional easement language inserted into the lease. And so the language was there, written in there, it's the same links in the Darling lease, and it just makes sure that they have to leave the back of it open so we have emergency services, and they can't stop the adjacent building from getting their supplies or anything. So that's a language that we inserted there in the Article 5.4, limited access easement. And I talked to Mr. Krug, and we agreed, and so I brought forward the amendment.
So right now, if there's no discussion specific to that amendment, what we'll do is we'll call for a vote. That amendment will be incorporated, but we haven't yet approved the whole resolution. So we'll have discussion on the resolution as a whole. Madam Clerk?
Voting on the amendment to adopt the laydown version, Casagrande?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
DeMoss?
Yes.
Osenga?
Yes.
Wells?
Yes.
Calhoun?
Yes.
Mayor Terry?
Yes.
That amendment is approved.
So are there any questions from council to administration for the lease or the resolution in its entirety? Are we ready for a vote? Okay, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Voting on the approval of Resolution 2022-001 as amended, Calhoun?
Yes.
Wells?
Yes.
Casagrande?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
DeMoss?
Yes.
Osenga?
Yes.
Mayor Terry?
Yes.
That resolution is approved.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is, yep, so now let's take a 5-minute break. We'll return at 8:35. Thank you.
are ready, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you. We'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Next on the agenda is unfinished business. There is none. Following that is new business items, ordinances for introduction. The first ordinance for introduction is ordinance 2022-001. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance 2022-001 is amending portions of Seward City Code 15.10.140 definitions related to apartment, boarding house, dwelling, duplex, unit, hostel, hosted lodging unit, housing unit, insurance company, licenses, listing, listing site, lodging, motel, multi-story unit, owner, short-term rental transaction, sleeping unit, townhouse, transient, and whole house nightly, and enacting language in 15.10.226K pertaining to short-term rentals.
And I'm looking for a motion and a second.
I move for the introduction of ordinance 2022-001.
A second.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to administration for information.
Madam Mayor, Mass Community Development.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Just to be transparent, I came in very late stream on this, and most of the work was done before I came on, and then at our December meeting we adopted these things. But I can speak to kind of the general concept of continuing to need to define our code and definitions around these things, because as we grow and get more complex, we have to have definitions. And what my learning is so far as we've come into this is, someone came in the other day and they said, I'd like to build a tiny home. And I said, well, we don't have a tiny home in our definition. And so we then have to go find something that we think is close but not actually fitting. And because we get new nomenclature or new systems are developed, even just thinking about the concept of like Airbnb and VRBO developing, that causes like a whole other weight that we have to carry when it comes to dwelling definitions. Or we take something that we used to call it an Airbnb, and that's just what you did. Now that has a very different definition, and now we have to look at owner-occupied rentals, right? And so just in general, we will continue to do this. We've already found a number of other items that we have to continue to refine definitions. So that what it does is it's a lot more for us to carry on the inside, but it also creates a very clear process when people can go in and say, hey, that's exactly what I have, and this is the type of zoning I have, and this is the property that I have, and this defines whether I can or can't do it within my property. So that's speaking generally to adopting kind of greater definitions.
Great, thank you. Does council have any questions?
I do have a question. I did not watch the meetings where these were handled, and I've read through the definitions. I have been in the industry for about 19 or 20 years now, and my fear is I cannot relate the changes to how I've been operating for 20 years. So was there any discussion about, if we adopt this and there's something in there, I mean, there's a lot of vagueness. Are we gonna start shutting down people that have been in business for a while because of the code change, or was the intention that something more like what Mr. Ryerson presented, where it's just, we're trying to get the nightly lodging out of R1?
I don't know, it's not trying to get nightly lodging out of R1 at all. What we're trying to do is trying to make this so there's a clear process and understanding of definitions, and if people have questions, they can always come to us. And I do think it lies on us to make it so that it is clear, because that gets really wordy. And I'm understanding too that our language that we have here is actually very simple compared to like Anchorage's. And so it gets way more complex. But the thing that I think that we need to lean into as a department is that no one should have to be a code expert, but that what we should be doing is like, hey, if you live in R1, we should have a nice little pamphlet that just says everything you can and can't do at R1. That's very readable, has very good definitions, and it's something that's simple for people to understand, because if you go in there and start reading through, like, you can confuse yourself pretty quickly. And so I think, and the same thing would go with short-term rentals, I think we do need to develop a user-friendly document that sits on the outside that says, hey, this is what you need to do to be in compliance, this is your zone, this is what you can or can't do, and make it very simple. So, if that's helpful, but that's the direction that we do plan on going.
Are there any other questions for administration? And that will come back before us for public hearing and adopt, potential to adopt in 2 weeks.
I apologize. Did we open it up for public hearing tonight as well, or only for introduction?
It's just for introduction.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is, call for a vote? Yeah, okay.
Voting on the introduction of ordinance 2022-001. DeMoss?
Yes.
Wells?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
Casagrande?
Yes.
Calhoun?
Yes.
Osenga?
Yes.
Mayor Terry?
Yes.
That ordinance has been introduced and will come for public hearing and enactment on January 24th, 2022.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is ordinance 2022-002. Madam Clerk?
Ordinance 2022-002 is amending portions of Seward City Code 15.10.140 definitions, to amend the definition for light manufacturing, and to amend 15.10.226 land uses allowed table, allowing light manufacturing in a central business district with a conditional use permit.
And so that's Councilmember Wells.
Yeah, I'd like to declare a potential conflict of interest because I own the cannabis store downtown, and I believe this change could directly affect me in the future.
I'll go ahead and make a ruling on that. I'll go ahead and rule that you do have a conflict of interest. So I think at this time we'll have you step off the dais and you can sit in.
Sure.
Thank you. We are still looking for a motion and a second for introduction.
I move for the introduction of ordinance 2022-002.
I'll second.
Administration.
Light manufacturing is something that has historically taken place in the central business district. Actually, if we look back not too far, we actually probably see heavy manufacturing down there as well. But that's not really kind of where we're going nowadays. But we currently have some very positive businesses that do have light manufacturing in that district. We have people that are making beer, we have people that are making candy, we have people that are making jewelry. And so that's considered light manufacturing, although currently it's technically not allowable. And so we want to make the definition so that what they're doing is allowable under conditional use permit. And a conditional use permit, that's something that a lot of different entities or businesses have to jump through just to make sure that they are kind of checking all the boxes for what's allowed in that area. And we do want to maintain the spirit of kind of what by definition of what the central business district is, but also too there's kind of two things that go behind this. The first one is if we say we don't allow that there, what that does is it actually drops the value of the owner's business because they can't actually sell it because the person that would come and buy it if they are doing light manufacturing cannot actually continue to do so. And then the other piece is too is that if there's a business that wants to start something else that's light manufacturing that would really be a great fit in the central business district, they technically couldn't get in. So by allowing it and creating a CUP process for it, and actually doing a little bit better job defining it, that's not interfering with other businesses, that's not going to interfere with noise or smell or sound. Anyway, allows businesses to continue to do what they're doing and new ones that fit that kind of same model to come in and be successful at that. Any questions?
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for administration? Go ahead.
I do have just procedurally, so, I guess it kind of goes back to the same question I was just asking with the language in the nightly lodging.
Mm-hmm.
So, say we do adopt this, and the people that are already manufacturing, in the event they don't have a CUP, are they going to be asked to go through the CUP process, or are they grandfathered in?
I would tend to think they're going to be grandfathered in that. So it's they're already doing what they're doing, we're just now allowing it.
Okay.
So And because the same kind of thing too, the way it's gone in the past, even if we were to say it's not allowed, they would still be grandfathered in, so we don't want to like penalize them by, even though we are allowing it.
Got it.
But then like if the business were to change hands, that new owner, even if they're continuing on with that business, would have to apply for that. And to do that, or if either of those businesses would actually deviate from what they're currently doing in that light manufacturing a little bit, then they would have to apply for that CUP in that. So.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Just one clarification that I know the answer to, but just for the public, when you do get the CUP, that's a one-time, you can have that CUP for your business, and like you said, unless there's a change of ownership or a change in the type of business,
correct,
you have that CUP indefinitely.
Yeah, as long as you're continuing your business in that same use, that's not something you need to renew every year.
Great, thank you.
Madam Clerk, I think we're ready for a vote on the introduction.
Voting on the introduction of ordinance 2022-002. DeMoss?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
Casagranda?
Yes.
Osenga?
Yes.
Calhoun?
Yes.
Mayor Terry?
Yes.
That ordinance is introduced and will come for public hearing and enactment on January 24th, 2022.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is resolutions. The first resolution for us to take up is resolution 2022-003.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Wells, you can return.
Oh. Come back up, sorry.
It's all good.
Resolution 2022-003 is authorizing the city manager to execute task order R&M number 21-00 with R&M Consultants for the development of the SMIC bench in the amount not to exceed $123,395 and appropriating funds.
I'm looking for a motion and a second.
I move for the approval of Resolution 2022-003.
I'll second.
And the start of this is found on page 134, and I will turn it over to administration.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Something that I want to address and clarify with this action is that what we're looking for is to find out what we don't know. For instance, we've heard that it's not possible to do this project up on the bench. This allows to know that for sure. We think it is feasible, but the engineering allows us to know for sure one way or the other. And I believe it's within the first $23,000 of this appropriation, we would have the answer to that. If it comes back as not feasible, then we'll stop. We're obviously not going to continue on. But the appropriation is necessary so that way we can find out if it's a feasible project or not. Also, this is one of the ones that if it is feasible, we do want to move it, quote unquote, to more shovel ready than it is now, so that way we can pursue water sewer infrastructure funding for the project. Do you want to add?
Well, and I just wanted to add as well, this specific project was noted in the city's first comprehensive municipal land plan from 1995. P&Z reviewed the Muni land plan again this past summer, and it was also included as well. So this has been a long-standing project that's been discussed and current administration hears, and I'm not exaggerating, every single day, every single week from current members of our community, folks that would like to move to our community, and business owners. Just the last couple Rotary meetings that Jeanette and I have attended, business owners pull us aside all the time. What are you guys doing about housing? This specific project has the potential to be a game changer for us in the Seward community and possibly provide 100 plus. Talking with the community development director, the Salteshi Trail system over on the other side of the peninsula is a multi-use trail system. There's a lot of wetlands up on the bench that we know are not going to be developable for residential purposes, and so it would be cool to also explore like a recreational purpose for this. We want to get this project to shovel ready because we're confident that we could get either a low-cost loan or hopefully, a grant to pay for this project. So we want to move it forward, and just to reiterate what the city manager said, so there's a number of different phases in the task order itself, and R&M's pretty confident that once we get through the feasibility study, we'll have a good sense of how realistic this project is. So although you're approving the whole task order tonight, phase one, that first $23,000 should give us a sense, and if it's completely not viable, then we stop at that point.
Thank you. Are there any questions for administration? I'll go with Vice Mayor.
I'm looking on page 139 at the map outlining the Smith bench that you're referencing. It's been brought to our attention by a citizen that it should be the Mount Alice bench, but this includes across the river also there. So maybe Smick bench is a better name.
So I refer you back to, 139. It's funny you say that, just as it's referred to by a number of names. So the 1995 Muni Land Plan actually calls it the Nash Road Bench, or the quote 4th of July subdivision.
Okay.
So there's actually 4 different names that you can find in various documents.
Thank you.
I would encourage us not to get so caught up on the name
yeah.
as the focus of the project.
If I could just follow up.
Yes.
I just wanted to follow, or ask about that for that particular citizen, because it's historical, but it isn't all on Mount Alice, so this makes sense.
Yeah, just in a cursory review of documents as part of this project, I found 4 different names, and I found myself regularly confused as well.
Thank you. That's all I needed.
Councilmember Demas? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And if it is a feasible project, we will come up with one name that will make sense, and we'll move that, and then we'll all be on that name, with that name, if it is a feasible project.
Councilmember Demas?
Could you tell us what after phase one would bring, if they do say it's a viable, what can we get for the rest of our money?
So,
Sorry, is it in here? I'm so sorry.
It would be fun to talk about it and let the public hear. I think it's a good question. It is included.
So,
oh, here we go, yes.
Yeah, so there's a detailed kind of review of each of the different phases on page 142, and then page 144 gives the cost breakdown associated with
Thank you,
this.
I'm so sorry.
Some of this is also going to be weather dependent. Phase one, we can start fairly soon in the spring season, but just depending on snow load, we probably won't get done with like a lot of the ground sampling and that sort of work. Phase two potentially could go, into the summertime, but we're definitely not looking at completion of phase one until early spring, I would say.
Okay, that's good to know the timeline. Councilmember?
Just one more question, please. What is the potential of getting the infrastructure funds with the timeline? If we have the feasibility study done, find out that we can do it, get it shovel ready. What means it's shovel ready? Just saying that we're gonna do it and having that on paper?
That's a really good question that I can tell you all municipalities are asking right now. Some clarification that we've received, and I do want to say somewhat unofficial, other than the word that we're hearing, is that it doesn't have to be completely project ready, meaning we don't have to have plans of streets and so on and so forth to make this a shovel ready project, but it has to be more than conceptual. So doing these next steps takes us out of the should it be feasible, takes us out of the conceptual into moving forward an actual plan.
Okay.
So I was a little confused on the area. I actually drove over there today and used I used a hunting app, Onyx, to really get a topographical view of the area and see what it was all about. We did get some citizen comments, and I'm curious. So it says, hopefully we can address some of the letters that they sent in. Phase one, you said, is 23 and some change, right? And however, we don't know anything about the wetlands or any type of that stuff. So until feasible study week 2, is that right? Where did it go?
You're correct. It is week 2. That's still within the phase 1.
Phase 1.
Right. It's just the timing is what they're talking about there.
So for 23 and some change, we would not only know if it was possible, but we would know the effect on, for once and for all, we would know the effect on the wetlands, the effect on the soil, all that type of stuff. Right? Okay. Thank you.
I might be missing something, and it might just be the date of this letter, but on page 142, it says phase 3 is not included in this estimate. But then on page 144, oh, sorry, there you go, I was missing it. I thought it said phase 1, 2, and then 3, but it's actually 1, 2, and 2. Okay, never mind, sorry. One last question, just for clarification. We are not entering into a contract of any kind, and, I mean, I take administration's word that if it's not feasible, we stop at 23,000. I know there was a lot of concern from the public, and I always, want to know, the constituents to know that we're all listening.
Absolutely.
And being very cautious with the spending, and we're not just throwing money to the wind. And I actually was questioning whether I was gonna support this or not because of the dollar amount and the feedback I was getting from constituents. But knowing that it's just 23,000 to get somewhere before we go further makes me feel comfortable. So thank you for working that through.
If I just may clarify, because it has come up as well, comments that we've heard, this does not approve the project itself, just this part of the engineering. And I know that you understand that, but I do want the public to understand this does not, this will come back many, many, many times before you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, let's call for a vote on this.
Voting on the approval of Resolution 2022-003. McClure?
Yes.
Casagrande?
Yes.
Demas?
Yes.
Calhoun?
Yes.
Osenga?
Yes.
Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Terry?
Yes.
That resolution is approved.
Next on the agenda is Resolution 2022-004. Madam Clerk?
Resolution 2022-004 is authorizing the city manager to purchase two 2022 Ford F-150 Super Crew Cab police responder trucks from Kendall Ford of Anchorage under the State of Alaska Fleet Vehicle Contract with associated upfitting and fire-specific equipment from Alaska Safety and Procom Alaska in the amount not to exceed $122,463.92 and appropriating funds.
And I am looking for a motion and a second.
I move for the approval of Resolution 2022-004.
I'll second.
And I'll turn it over to administration.
Resolution 2022-004 is the purchase to replace the two current command vehicles, which are Dodge 3500 diesels, mega cabs. So we're actually downsizing just a little bit by getting gasoline-powered V6 F-150s. These are needed for the command rigs. They carry a lot of equipment. They have traffic cone, a tow kit, a toolbox, bunker gear, wilding gear, shovels, 5-gallon bucket of gravel, 5-gallon bucket of oil spill. There's a lot of equipment that we carry. In fact, there's equipment we can't carry in the current command vehicles because it's got a tonneau cover, so it limits our height. So we're going to actually get a full shell on it, so we'll be able to maximize the full space of the truck bed. So if you have any questions.
I'll start off with a question. What will you do with the vehicles that you're replacing?
That would be surplus.
What is the condition? Are we replacing these because of the condition, or is this just a regular upgrade?
Of the condition. They're 2006, 99,000 miles, and we're getting some extremely difficult electrical problems that on command to Anchorage Dodge said don't bring it back up. They can't. They don't. There are no parts to fix it. It will have periodically. It won't crank. So it's not good when you get a 911 call and your truck doesn't start. So they've way past their service life.
So I appreciate you spending some time with me before the budget and explaining that to me. One question it just keeps in the back of my mind is the vehicles themselves. If 99,000, it's a 5.9 diesel, right? Mm-hmm. The vehicle themselves are in running order, but there's an electrical issue. And you had told me that part, whatever that electrical issue is, that Dodge no longer makes that part. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And however, there are used parts on the market which I asked about, and you said that we're not allowed to purchase used parts. Is that correct?
Said we're not allowed. It would be very liable if something happened putting used equipment into an emergency response vehicle.
Right, and until you mentioned that, the liability possibility to me, as a vehicle owner like most of us and a small business owner, just because something doesn't work and I can't order the part, first thing I'm gonna figure out is how to make it work. And I think a lot of the folks who live in our community they think that way as well. So I guess the question is then to the attorney, what is the liability for putting used parts into a service vehicle?
That isn't anything that I really know the answer of. I can just give you a general discussion of how liability works. The liability of a municipality for emergency responses, number one is there is some protection written into state statutes so that in many cases simple negligence is not enough for a monetary damage award to be received. It requires something beyond that, something that's really neglectful, more than just a simple error. That's in the emergency response, scenario, which this could fit. So the liability risk would be somewhat reduced. It's reduced further if there is a conscious decision made, especially if it's an exercise of judgment by elected officials on what's called a discretionary function, which means, there's kind of a choice of, do you do this or don't you do it? And if that choice is being made by an elected official, sometimes there's immunity from liability based on that decision, in part because the law of Alaska doesn't want elected officials to necessarily be driven entirely by, I don't want to get sued, so I'm going to make a decision like this. Now, this can be a complicated concept once the courts wrap their hands around it, because they try to figure out, once you've decided to do something, so in this instance, once you've decided that you're going to have a fire department, do you have the discretion, to give everyone shoddy equipment in the department that doesn't work? And they'll say, and the courts generally will say, no, you don't. Once you decide you're going to do something, then you sort of have to do it, correctly. But in a case like this, it would, you can't give a stock answer because, you've decided to provide some protection. You've got to do it the correct way. But when I start to look at it, I go, well, okay, what is the difference in reliability between a vehicle who has a part that the manufacturer no longer makes that you're then getting the used, how reliable, what are the details,
right.
like, are you buying it from some guy out of a paper bag in a back alley and, you have no idea if it's going to work or it doesn't have a warranty or, those types of details come into play. So, would there be automatic liability for getting a used part through a reliable used part, seller of used parts that contains some kind of warranty with it? Most likely not, So that's, but I don't, I don't know the particulars of this issue or how solvable it is or what the used part market is and whether they'll come with warranties and things like that. So anyway, that's kind of probably more than you wanted to hear, but that's sort of how it works.
And to be fair, this was a guess. This would be the thing that we would change next.
Sure.
But they're not saying, oh, if you buy that, it's going to be good to go. So it's chasing rabbits, and that's not the only issue. They all have quite a few nuances, and electric locks not working on certain doors and handles, and there's a ton of issues that are going on. Great engine, solid engine. Dodge builds a good diesel engine, but in emergency service, it's way past their time.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Councilman Rose?
I just wanted to say, again, thank you for that time down there, and as before I was in this position, and I think a lot of the folks that I talk to, they're like, geez, you know, it's another new truck, because they've got to go and they've got to deal with what they got to deal with, and they don't understand why we're up, you know, it's 100,000 miles on a 5.9 diesel. Majority of people who know anything about trucks would say the engine's not even broke in yet. And that's what I keep hearing, and so that's why I wanted to bring it up, and again, I appreciated your time and the city attorney's answer. Thank you.
Did you have a question, Councilman?
I do. I'm just curious if we ever, so I can understand now why we wouldn't want to leave a truck that won't turn over in perhaps the fire department, but do we ever take a vehicle from one motor pool, like the fire department, and give it to Parks and Rec for picking up picnic tables and stuff? So it's not necessarily that these will go on surplus, they may end up in another department, or?
Is there someone that?
With us, when we say surplus, just like a desk or a chair, we always put it out internally first. So anybody in the departments that could use it, that's with the equipment.
Okay.
So there's always that option, yes, before it goes on the auction.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out too that in the resolution, it states that the motor pool budget that we just passed includes money for both of these trucks.
Correct, and it's under budget and
it's
not
under-
asking for any additional appropriations.
Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, can we call for a vote, please?
Voting on the approval of resolution 2022-004. McClure?
Yes.
Olszewska?
Yes.
Calhoun?
Yes.
Wells?
Yes.
Casagrande?
Yes.
DeMoss?
Yes.
Mayor Terry?
Yes.
That resolution is approved.
Next on the agenda is Resolution 2022-005. Madam Clerk?
Resolution 2022-005 is directing the city manager to enter into negotiation to purchase the lots owned by Thomas Gillespie located at 2405 and 2413 Seward Highway for the future location of the Public Works Shop facility and to begin the required appraisal process.
I'm looking for a motion and a second.
I move for the approval of Resolution 2022-005.
Second.
And council can turn to page 193 of their packet, and I'll turn it over to administration for information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the resolution, both the agenda statement and the resolution list the dates of the work session, but we have discussed other properties for the Public Works facility location, one of them being the remainder of the Fort Raymond property. And in fact, Mr. Squires came today and we talked about that property. And as we talked about before, I don't believe that's the highest and best use of that property to put the Public Works facility there because of the possibility of housing in that location. And quite honestly, we have had many inquiries about that property and what the city is going to do with that property. So we do know there is a lot of interest for housing in that location. We talked about the snow dump and the required fill to bring in to be able to put the facility on the property. And as I said, Mr. Squires came in to talk to me today, and we talked about the bill on the Gillespie property, and certainly that would be, part of the due diligence is still the LiDAR information from the borough, which I do believe is about 2 weeks out still that we would receive. A month now? Okay, it keeps backing up. So we do the LiDAR. We still need to receive the LiDAR information regarding flooding, and then of course core samples and any other due diligence that we need to do along with the negotiation and the appraisal process.
So just to be clear, this resolution, by approving it, gives you the direction to begin negotiations. And what I hear you saying is whatever you negotiate, it will be contingent on soil tests, flood maps, environmental study, and the appraisal before there's any kind of agreement. And all those things will be presented back to us before we say, okay.
Yes, yes, in code, and I was searching for that, I'm not quite sure. In code, it does require that there'll be before, of course, the purchase, the public hearing, and at that time, all the terms and conditions be made public and all the information be made public. So yes, it'll all be brought back. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I know I suggested this before, and I forgot to mention it recently, but I'd like to have assurance that it's not within the flight zone from the airport to when they move the, the existing or the projected new runway for a building at that point.
Mayor, may I was looking, I don't know, maybe to strengthen to even for me for negotiation process, but perhaps an amendment, and I'm doing it off the top of my head, which is kind of scary, but we're starting with the title and to begin the required appraisal process and due diligence process. I mean, it kind of goes, it should be done no matter what, but it also does strengthen with the property owner the process that I need to complete before coming back to you. So if we could please add that, I would appreciate that.
I'll make a motion to add the city manager's suggested language.
I'll second.
Okay, and then.
You need to hear it again.
Let's just clarify it, because I was struggling to try to develop a whereas or a section, but if it's in the title, and to begin the required appraisal and other due diligent processes, is that what we're looking, is that your motion?
Yes, ma'am.
I think that would cover it.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
If I can just speak to that, I feel like just to enter into a negotiation to purchase, that in that negotiation, I think you've received clear direction from council that we want that due diligence as a contingency in that negotiation.
Sure.
So I made the motion and asked for a second just for discussion terms, but I think that it's already originally covered within the title, but either way, I'm fine to.
I think I'd like the language in with the amendment because that just firms it up more clearly, because there's a lot of stuff to look at in this property, I feel.
And I'll speak in support of the motion too, and I like that we didn't name specific things. I think we've mentioned some things, but there might be more as you go through the process that people bring up to you. So by not name, I think you have in the minutes where we're going with some of the things we'd like to see, but it's not an extensive list. So if there's no further, Councilman.
Mayor, Chair, just one thing, and I don't like to assume things, but with all of this, the assumption is at any point we can back out of the negotiation at no cost to the city, no liability to us.
That is my understanding. I would just turn to the city attorney, but that is my understanding.
Well, it's fairly common in property agreements, even if they're, at an earnest money stage, for the parties to be able to define a so-called due diligence period. So oftentimes it is 30 to 90 days or so. That's a period of time in which the prospective buyer is given permission to go onto the property, conduct whatever tests and inspections they want to do. It also can include historical research, it can include everything under a label called due diligence. And it is typically a no-fault, if we determine that through due diligence that this isn't the property for us, you then get your earnest money back. That's very common in a real estate contract. So I didn't think this is a specific contract is before you for approval this evening, but I think it's the concept of going forward to discuss with the property owner. And so you can also have, even absent an earnest money, you can just have an agreement with somebody that says, hey, I'm interested in this property, but I want to check it out for a couple months before I get back to you, and I need to do this, this, and this. And nobody will sign anything. They'll just say, yeah, sure, you can go on the property, do whatever test you want. So I don't know how formal this particular one is intended to be, but it's pretty easy to limit the risk to the city.
If I can just comment more on Councilmember Calhoun's question, there is money, there's a cost for the environmental study, cost for the soils test, okay, and a cost for the appraisal. Nothing.
And so actually my question, I think it still falls under this amendment. Are those items, do you feel like those items are already budgeted within the current city budget, or will you have to come back with additional funds for those?
I feel like, yes, I do feel that it is budgeted. And however, if we, and I, have an idea in my mind of what the budget looks like, and however it ends up being more, I will come back.
Okay. So we're ready to vote on that amendment.
Voting on the amendment to include other due diligence processes. Casagrande?
Yes.
Wells?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
Bosenga?
Yes.
Calhoun?
Yes.
Demas?
Yes.
Mayor Terry?
Yes.
That amendment is approved.
Now we have the resolution back on the floor. Are there any further discussion items?
Mayor Terry, sorry, just one other question now on this. Is, or can there be something in their negotiations or in our understanding that if, in the period of time that we're looking at this, another better location actually surfaces, that we would want to look at, that we're able to stop that negotiation? Granted, we may have spent some money on testing and those kind of things, but just so that until we vote to actually purchase the property, we can always look at something else?
Yes, I would believe so. I think that we will talk about a written document, the attorney and I, that will reference these items.
Well, I mean, maybe so my question would be, we come up with a much better idea. I mean, we could be in subsequent negotiations with another property owner, or we could be in, testing for, I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but I also don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. I mean, we want to give you direction to open up and negotiate with this, but not to the detriment of maybe the next good idea. Does that sound about right? Does that make sense? Is that something administration's willing to? Any further discussion? Madam Clerk?
Voting on the approval of resolution 2022-005 as amended. Bosenga?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
Casagrande?
Yes.
Demas?
Yes.
Calhoun?
Yes.
Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Terry?
Yes.
That resolution is approved.
Next on the agenda is resolution 2022-006.
Resolution 2022-006 is directing the city manager to create a project plan for the expansion of utility infrastructure, which will increase residential development within city limits.
I'm looking for a motion in a second.
I move for the approval of Resolution 2022-006.
I'll second.
I'll speak to this if council could turn to, it starts on page 203 of the packet. Councilmember Demas and I have been talking to administration. Actually the former mayor and fire chief mentioned it before. A lot of times what we do with extending utilities is reactionary based on people coming in, project ideas. This doesn't put any money towards any engineering, but rather ask administration to come up with more of a plan on, in my opinion, getting the most bang for our buck. So, a benefit cost analysis kind of concept of, here's some potential utilities that can be expanded, here's the type of residential development we would get out of that. And just working with them on more of a systematic way to think about extending our utilities. Again, not committing to anything, but just trying to get sort of a master plan on what that might look like, and just so council, just so administration knows that council is interested in something like that, and that's why this resolution is before you today. And I don't know, Councilmember DeMoss, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I think it's just a good formality almost, because we all have been kind of discussing it, you know, in smaller groups and all together and at the dais sometimes for quite a while. So I think it's good just to kind of lock in exactly what we're expecting, give some direction, and have a plan.
And that, you know, what's developed out of that will come back before us, whether it's in a work session or something to approve. So, you know, there'll be some opportunity to discuss and look at those items. Is there any questions we can answer, Councilmember?
I'd just like to say thank you to both of you for being proactive and putting the energy into all of this. And thank you to administration for getting on board and finding ways that we can be proactive without a lot of cost. So hopefully this keeps momentum and it's a great idea. So yeah.
If there's no further discussion, Madam Clerk, call for a vote.
Voting on the approval of Resolution 2022-006, DeMoss.
Yes.
Calhoun.
Yes.
Leclerc.
Yes.
Osenga.
Yes.
Wells.
Yes.
Casagrande.
Yes.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
That resolution is approved.
Next on the agenda is Resolution 2022-008. Madam Clerk.
Resolution 2022-008 is authorizing the sale of real property located at 1911 Dora Way, also known as the Dora Way Playground, by sealed bid as provided by Seward City Code.
And we're looking for a motion in a second.
I move for the approval of Resolution 2022-008.
Second.
And I'll turn it over to administration.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am going to speak to process, and the Assistant City Manager has done the bulk of the work on this, so I'll have him speak to it. The attorney and I have been talking about process for the acquisition and the disposition of land. There's a little bit of difference in code, so we're trying to integrate it to make sure we meet all code provisions. And so through this process, this is the first resolution that the council will consider and possibly adopt. And this gives us authority to start the process of the sealed bid. And then again, it comes back to you with the terms, conditions, and then a public hearing will be held and another resolution that you will consider for adoption. So that's just the process. This is the initial, yes, go ahead and start the sealed bid process. And as far as the project, the Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director have done the work on the project. Go for it.
Community Development Director probably want to chime in. I guess the only thing I would add to what the City Manager said is this is just another location that we feel like would be an ideal location for somebody to build a home and reside in Seward. And as part of the municipal land plan, Community Development Director and I have been working together a lot to identify other similar lots. Believe it or not, the city owns a number of other appropriate locations throughout the city that we feel like could spur development as well. So.
And the only other thing I'd like to add is that I realize that this is a park lot for that community, and with the new community area at the Jesse Lee home, that's actually only like I measured it out, it's like 300 feet distance, and so it's not that far. So that will be enough. So I just want to make sure we're not taking something out and not having something that's close by that's replacing it. And so that's kind of justification around there as well, is that we will have a larger, greater community place right nearby.
Vice Mayor?
I would like to propose or move that we postpone this until the next meeting for the reason that it wasn't published in the January 5th journal, and I want to make sure that the public is very aware that we're doing this. It's not that I'm opposed.
And I'll speak to supporting that. I think I appreciate administration bringing this forward. I don't think we're on the gun for any time period. So just to make sure that it would be legal for us to make a determination on this tonight, but I don't know that it would be fair to the community. So I am speaking in support of that postponement. Any other comments? Madam Clerk, can we have a vote on postponing resolution 2022-008?
Voting on the motion to postpone, Osenga,
Yes.
Calhoun,
Yes.
Wells,
Yes.
Casagranda,
Yes.
Demas,
Yes.
McClure,
Yes.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
That motion is approved, so this resolution will come as unfinished business on January 24th, 2022.
Thank you. Other new business items, item 2, schedule a special meeting with Committee of the Whole to discuss the legal relationship between the City of Seward and Providence Hospital on February 14th at 6 p.m. You can look at page 279 for information on that, and I'll let administration speak to that if they might.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have started speaking, we had, initial meetings with Providence to ensure that they wanted to have this meeting and to really basically break apart and go on their own without us. So this, this one's the health center, and so, and Providence as well. So we want to have a special meeting so that we can further discuss it. So that way Providence will be in attendance, we'll be in attendance, and we can further discuss it. As you know, the relationship was formed to basically get the facility up and going, and they are up and going and flourishing and doing a great job, and they don't need us anymore. And in some ways, it's better to be without us because it opens different types of funding for them.
And just to, first of all, I won't be here, so I wanted to put that on the record. And also, this is for Mountain Haven or also the management contract of the hospital?
Not, we will discuss both of them and not the management contract. I mean, our thought is that Providence has the facility, they will remain with the facility. You know, we're not talking about the contract at all, but it'd be both facilities would be.
My question is 6 o'clock enough time? We do have a meeting that night at 7. Do we need to start at 5:30?
If we could, that would be great.
And so this will be our first time that we have a special meeting with the Committee of the Whole, so we will, that'll give us some leeway, and then we'll have a packet in case there's actual action that needs to take place. So, Madam Clerk, I'll move to hold this meeting as outlined in the agenda on February 14th, 2022 at 5:30.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And then, call for a vote.
Sure, voting on scheduling the special meeting, Osenga,
Yes.
Calhoun,
Yes.
McClure,
Yes.
Casagranda,
Yes.
Demas.
Yes.
Wells,
Yes.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
Okay, that meeting has been scheduled.
Thank you. Under informational items and reports, in your packet, you'll see the city clerk letter to the public convenience for the Highliner restaurant. That's on page 308. And then next is citizen comments. There's no sign in for this comment period. Time is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Is there anyone wishing to speak?
Go ahead.
Cliff Crew, inside city limits. Linda and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you guys for passing the resolution 2002-001. Gives us an opportunity to continue to grow and be of service to the Seward community with visitors into the future. I know it's late and you guys have executive session, so I wanted to do 2 other things, to thank a couple other people and then also to kind of beat the drum again about what small businesses need. We continue to need your support. First of all, we started our business in 2016 and we're still here thanks to the Seward community. It's kind of surreal to have this opportunity now after everything that's happened over the last 24 months, and it's only because of the support that the community has given us, and we're grateful. Also, thanks to our staff, both past and present. The business has grown through them and with them, and we couldn't have done it without them. We also want to recognize the sewer chamber and all three versions of it that have been here since we've been here. They've been great partners, great energy and enthusiasm, and they've helped us grow as business people and leaders in the community. We especially want to recognize Nicole Lawrence from the bottom of our hearts. She was one of the first people to befriend us when we first arrived here, and she's been a part of literally every idea, transition, and thought through the process, and we can't say enough things. In regards to the challenges that we're facing, as owners of a year-round business, we continue to need the City Council's help and the Chamber's help, meeting these challenges efficiently and sustainably. Housing, I've heard it over and over. We retain 2 3-bedroom apartments year-round, to be able to facilitate summer employment, and it's not enough for us. We struggle to attract talent for our full-time year-round positions because the housing is sparse, available, and so expensive. And this really is like one of our biggest challenges, because we sought to create livable wages and benefit packages, but without housing, none of it means anything. Also, for retail space is at a premium here. We are fortunate, to be in the opportunity, to have the opportunity that we have today. But there are so many talented individuals, artisans, makers, with great ideas, that need to start small, and there are no opportunities available. And I think that, that's something that needs to be addressed. In the 5 years that we've been here, we've listened to a lot of ideas and great ideas, but, it's been hard to see concrete action taken towards realizing that. Finally, the sewer, in the short time that we've been here, we've tried to be a part of the solutions and take part in initiatives to make things happen. One of them was making sewer, developing the year-round destination concept of that. And just in the last 3 years, it's been interesting to see it decline even in our phase, from our perspective. And we experienced firsthand the frustration, like especially this year. And it's more pronounced with people that are looking for places to eat, things to do as individuals and for their family members. They're just not available as they once were. And again, even in the 5 years, it's gone down. And I spent time talking to some of you here about potential solutions and things that we can do. And again, it's I think that ideas are great, but we need concrete action to make that happen. So thanks again. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with the city, with the chamber, and the other business communities. And we hope to see everybody out at the Polar Bear Jump this weekend. Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Yeah. Thank you. Bob Valdez, 520 Fifth Avenue. December 26th, I got a phone call from Wano. He's the plank, one of the plank boys with the USS Alaska. So how's your project going? He said, Bobby, I can't find no property. What can you do? So I was scouting around. Boulder Field, it's Boulder Field on the south end, and there's a dry wash right there. And I think that dry wash was left over. I wasn't here, and Willard never know it, not longer with us, so he can't say. But I think that dry wash has been left over for when they dredged the harbor where all the condos, and left it for some reason. And it's got grass and a couple trees there. But I think if we maybe take a little bit of Boulder Field here and back up to the restroom here, I think his project could fit in there. I don't know how big his project is, what he's got planned. And he called me today, and he's on the scope or whatever you call it, he's listening to us. I suggested to him, did he want to put it in the water? My suggestion was don't put it in the water because there's too much maintenance there. Make it look like the USS Alaska, that replica, is being dry docked. So you're sitting over here by that road that goes to the pump station, And the only guys that use that road is snaggers and the guys that check the pump station. So could I get with community development or something and look that property? It's a lot of snow there for him to see, but I know what it looks like. Could we get that property feasibly? And I'm willing, if we get the property, I'll pay for the surveying. You know, I'll pay to get it surveyed to set the lot up, and then they'll have to go from there on that. So where do we start, or how do we say? Now, like I say, his crew is in Anchorage right now on scope or whatever you call it. They're reviewing this. So what can I say? Can I get a meeting with the community development director and then come back to y'all or something? But I think that's the only place, and you're not losing any parking because seagulls don't even land in that hole. It's a driveway. So we'd have to get back though, which I know you guys are more than willing to give us for the waterfall. But we're looking for this property, and I don't know how many footage it would be or nothing like that. And we might have to cheat on Boulder Fields a little bit like that. So, where can I come up with some kind of decision or details? Like I say, they're listening and get us an idea, because they're really chopping at the bit to go. And I understand Captain Sharon Anderson's retiring, and she joined the force. And who brought the submarine to Seward? Captain Anderson. So, recognition to her. So.
I'll make sure that administration has his phone number and we'll coordinate.
Okay, and I appreciate it. Like I said, if the community director wants to go down with me, I can't tomorrow, but one day or coffee break or something. I'm off on Thursday, and I'll give him that. But I'm sure we can come around 7th Avenue. I'm sorry, come down 4th Avenue. Boulder Field's here. And you can. There's a dog leg right in here. The restroom is here. You can access here, here, and here. And I think it'd be an ideal. And the guy's staying at the motel gateway or something like that is gonna look out and say, that's it, you know. And they won't need much parking, I don't think. But when your coordinator, have they got an artist's conception what they got in mind, what they're gonna do? I'm in the dark on that part. So I appreciate your time, folks.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Now you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
I could probably use it.
You can take all 5.
I'm impressed. Bob Valdez has come up with gigantic ideas for a long, long time, many, many years, and it's wonderful to hear the contributions that can then wind up being a real project. I'm happy to hear the efforts you've made tonight towards land development. That's kind of a broad view, but looking at the bench, whatever you want to call it, is a good start. When Andy built his house over across the beach, nobody thought much about that hillside, but you know, that's always, that's in the city property, and it's always been an interesting place to build. When this topic first came up, I talked to actually Cindy Eklund, who was on her way to Kenai, who talked to Marcus Mueller, who's the borough land manager. Marcus gave us a map that showed available borough land, and the clerk has that map. I don't know if it's been spread out, but some of that land is adjacent to the bench land along Nash Road of the Iditarod Trail. A build out of utilities that you're talking about is important. My fellow board member Paquette has an interest in the Lowell, the sewer plant that may need another one. All these things are kind of looking like, well, we got a development project towards the north of Seward. So looking at all these things, putting them together, including borough land, city land, private development, I think it's something that's time has come. And I'm not going to use my whole 5 minutes because that's the whole thing. I think that staying on all these things and exploring them all the options, all the opportunities, brainstorming. You know, there is one thing I want to say. I think less than half the people in this room have been in this town 20 years. Some have exceeded that by a few. But the people who come to Seward bring a new energy and a new vision. And sometimes they're not saddled by the burdens of what's the way it's been. You know, let's not think about the way it's been, let's think about the way it could be.
I'm going to put that outside city limits.
I want to thank Bruce Jaffe for the work he did on PACAB, putting the list together and taking the idea of employment retention. So subsequent to that meeting, I met with the new chair of PACAB, and we took Brenda's suggestion. And I think, and I've met with Kat at the chamber today. And so I think what we're going to do, rather than, what we're going to pursue, rather than having speakers come to PACAB over the next couple of months, we're going to pick a date, and we're going to have a public community event at the library, like we did when we did this, the climate action plan meeting. We'll have all the speakers then on that same day, but then it will be open to the community as well so that we can do some brainstorming. There's a lot of intersectionality between these different topics because it's not just housing. Quite frankly, there's nothing to do here in the winter if you don't like to be outside or if you don't like to ski or cross-country ski. There's really nothing to do. So that's another big thing, right? How do you get people to come here and stay here year-round when there's nothing to do in the winter? So, I mean, that's just two things. It's housing, it's something to do, it's affordability. There's a lot of different topics. So I think we're thinking at this point of having that kind of a meeting instead, because then everybody can be involved and it can be a much broader scope of information gathering. I know you want to go into executive session, and I can't think of anything else that I had on the, I mean, I had other things, but, so thank you very much. Everybody's doing great work. It's really, it's wonderful to see. Thank you.
The gentleman in the back.
Doug Schessler, Inside City Limits. I was just, I was impressed with the hospice. That we have such a small hospice. It's going, they're doing some real good work. But I challenge everybody to donate to the hospice. In fact, if anybody, whatever you donate that they can show me by the end of this month, by February 1st, I'll match up to $500. Wow. So anybody here or the public, if you're watching, make me pay. That's all I got.
That's awesome. Love that. Anyone else wishing to speak? Next on the agenda is, that's a hard act to follow, but next on the agenda is council administration comments in response to citizen comments, so I'll turn it over to administration first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and you're on, because I was just thinking, because, my dad recently passed away, and I was going to donate in honor him. So, anyway, you're paying, man. If it's acceptable, Madam Mayor, I was thinking that questions regarding the audit, if council members want to email me, and then I will pass them on. So we might contact the auditors about perhaps coming on site for this next meeting. We'll work all that out in March, but in the meantime, if you want to email me questions, I'll make sure that they get them. Also, one announcement that I didn't make earlier that I had forgotten about is that Carmen Jackson CPA LLC will be on site on Monday. They'll be here the entire week. Very excited about that. That's all I have tonight.
Councilmember Wells, you can kick it off.
Okay. So, first, thank you to the administration and Public Works for taking care of the roads. I only fell down 5 times today, and it was all on my own property. I was impressed today. We had that freezing rain, and I had to pound my truck doors to get them open, and then I had to kick my way out of them. And I was on my way to a meeting outside of town, and when I was driving through downtown, I was noticing how awesome the sidewalks are looking. So I was pretty happy to see that, and I spoke with some other year-round residents who were shopping downtown, and they were impressed with that as well. So thank you to the community for that. And again, thank you to the administration for taking such time to talking to me about the liabilities of the used parts, because I did get a lot of questions about that. Also, we got a couple letters regarding some of the property developments, and I want to make sure that those citizens know that we all talked about it and are taking that into deep consideration. And that including the Door property, I spent a large portion of this morning driving around and looking at those properties and trying to really understand what we were thinking about doing. And so I hope that they realize that we are not just okay in everything, that we care. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Calhoun?
Just want to thank everybody that came and took part in this tonight. It's good to see a lot of community involvement. We don't always get that. Bob, just so you know, natural gas has always been one of my things. When I was on the council the first time, I worked with NSTAR to figure out how to get it here. They said we didn't have enough use. It wouldn't pencil out for them to put a line in here. I said, well, what about just running it along the rail from the Portage Whittier cutoff there, because it's got natural gas to there, and they said the Alaska Railroad would charge too much for the right-of-way use of that. So we also had another company back in the mid to later 90s that wanted to build a regasification plant here and bring the stuff in by ship and regasify it for us. And the city council back then would not approve a $25,000 matching feasibility study at that time. So I'm on it with you. Natural gas is a great way to go. So we'll work on that. Congratulations to the girls basketball team. That's a nice win for us. And everybody just be safe this polar bear jump off weekend. It's going to be very busy. A lot of stuff going on. I know the weather right now isn't all that friendly, but it might make turkey bowling a little easier for us. We haven't been able to do that for a couple, 3 years because gravel's really tough to bowl a frozen turkey on. So we'll hope for a nice sheet of ice out there to do that. And everybody just be careful because it's gotten a lot slicker since we've been sitting in here.
I'd just like to state that I will be gone until the first meeting in March. I'll be back. I might try to listen telephonically, or I may watch on YouTube, but I may just check out. So I'm not sure yet. I'll stay in communication though. The best way to get a hold of me is still my cell phone. I'd like to echo the congratulations to the girls basketball. The part of the many joys of living in a small community is to watch groups of children grow up together and do really amazing things together. So that was awesome to witness. I'd like to thank all of council and administration for getting stuff done. We have a housing crisis and we just watched so many things happen tonight, starting with citizens coming and saying it's an issue, to passing a whole bunch of things to work towards focusing on the issue. And I really want to just thank everybody for being proactive and being a yes group, because I do think it's not just going to pay off for our current situation, but also for the future generations to come, because we have a lot of really amazing children that would love to call Seward their home. Because once you get out there, it's not so cool. That's it. Thank you. Councilmember Demas.
Thank you for the people that came to speak from Hospice. It's such a great organization, and I'll take you up on that offer too, Doug, because I just am so thankful that they're here in Seward, and I know they haven't been here long, and I just think that I really want them to stay, so I'd like to support them in any manner that we can. The forensic audit came back kind of how I expected. I was hoping that we would find out more reasons why things happened. I'm confident in the administration we have now, so I feel good that there's going to be a good, transparent effort to make things how they should be. But I look forward to cleaning all of that up. I went to the Cape Head Industry Outlook Forum last week, which was awesome. Kenai Peninsula Economic Development District. I'm a board member now, which I'm really excited about. Lots of really great speakers, just kind of, Jeanette was there, Melissa from First National Bank was there, Jason Pickling from Community Development, Councilmember Wells. It was just a good group of folks from the Seward community kind of representing, and got a good look on, you know, kind of what is on the horizon for Alaska's economy, and it's looking good. So, you know, we've been through a lot, but everyone's feeling pretty optimistic. One last thing I wanted to mention was, two more things. The visitor's guide looks great, and I love the new additions, and welcome Kat to being the director. I think she's amazing. I got to spend some time with her at the Outlook Forum, and she has such a great vibe, so I'm just really excited for her to be, you know, promoting Seward. And one last thing I was thinking, maybe we could, as a council, send Magistrate Peck a thank you card for all of the years of service from just us, you know. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, congrats to the Borough Champion girls basketball team. That's pretty special. I didn't realize that the polar bear jump off was this weekend. Boy, I'm just behind the times here. I go to Mexico and I forget everything. So show your support for the polar bear jump off. That'd be great. Yeah, and thank you to George for his many years of service to the area here, not just Seward, but the surrounding area. Great career I believe he had, and be safe out there.
Vice Mayor?
Okay, yeah, polar bear jump is this weekend, John. So I was going to mention that, yeah, Councilmember Calhoun had mentioned about the difficulties of turkey bowling under certain conditions, so hopefully that will go well. I want to give a shout out to a couple of things. We had the best power outage we've ever had the other day. And a shout out to all involved with that. Immediate updates from administration to council, so when all those people call me, I can tell them. But the best news was our generators were on in record time thanks to the crew, and they went off in record time thanks to the crew that fixed the problem. So I was able to tell people, you know, we live in one of the most civilized places in Alaska because our power goes out for just less than an hour and it's back on, and we're happy about that. So all those shout outs. The other is I went and got my driver's license renewed upstairs, and I want to give a shout out to the friendly, courteous, wonderful person who works there, and it was just a really good experience. So I'm glad we could do that here and not somewhere else. It is dangerous out there, it's slippery, and I am not going to fall again. I haven't fallen since that horrible time in July, but I'm intending not to, so just be cautious out there. Be cautious about COVID. I've had to cancel and Zoom a few things because of COVID people already, so again. I'm really excited about how the city is right now. The administration, department heads, and the council. I think you witnessed difficult, long evening, but we get things done, and the comment about it doesn't always have to be the way it always was is a very, very good one. I'm somebody that was here when it always was, and it wasn't always that great. It's time to move forward in a lot of ways, so I'm happy about that. And I will be donating to Hospice also.
Put a cap on that. You know, and I'll jump off at your comment to say, I know we had another power outage for folks
there was
at the
the
edge
other
of town
one,
going
right.
out. And while I know that was a little bit longer potentially, it was great communication. I saw on Facebook, you know, updates, notices. So, you know, that's half the battle, and then getting people back up. So thank you to our linemen and our crews and administration. I encourage people to go out and eat and shop during Polar Bear. I've jumped in it twice. I think my husband was 18 years, and this time I'm just going to go out to eat. So go out and support your local businesses. You know, just in that interim time, great job to our Seward High School wrestling boys. There were a number of boys that went to state, and a number of boys that also placed at state. So we'll see if we can get information from those coaches and just make sure they get some recognition. And I was at the grocery store the other night, and AvTech students are back. So it's great to have that. It's great to have AvTech in our community, have those students here learning about marine and all the other trades. So we're just, it's great to have those kids and adults here. I went to a mayor's meeting prior to the KPED forum, and it was just great to get together with all the mayors from the peninsula with our shared concerns, redistricting, looking at, just some items with the borough when it comes to planning and zoning and plating. So it was good to have an opportunity to coordinate with them, and then we plan to do those a little bit more often. So when it's a more formal situation, I'll give the council more of an update. And finally, the KPED, folks can go online and watch all those presentations. So if anyone's interested, it was very well done, and I did not travel, but they're very clear online. So right now, next on the agenda is going into executive session. Does anyone on council need a quick break, or do we want to go right into it?
Yeah.
I need a quick break.
Okay, well, let's do, we'll come back right at 10 o'clock in 5 minutes. So sorry. We are gonna go into executive session to discuss the United Cook Inlet Drift Association and Cook Inlet Fishermen's Fund in 5 minutes, to include the city attorney and city administration and all of council.
Excuse me. They tell you, Lauren, you don't sign that,